Hello, Airbus Cockpit Coach here. In this video, we're going to run through the turnaround procedure, and I'm going to take you through the standard flows I would use in the real world to get our Airbus A320 prepared for our next departure. It's worth bearing in mind that these do vary from airline to airline, but what I'll show you is a solid framework you can follow inside Microsoft Flight Simulator, and it reflects how things are typically done in real-world Airbus operations. So we've just pulled onto stand here at Belfast, and we're doing our parking checks. Radar and predictive wind shear system is off. Parking brake is set, and that's checked on ECAM and acupressure. The engines we've already selected to off. Exterior lights are off, everything except the nav lights or the turnaround, so they stay on as the aircraft continues to be electrically powered. The fuel pumps as required, so with my operator on a turnaround, if we require refueling, we would turn the center tanks off. The center tank transfer pumps off. If we don't require refueling, they can stay on. And we don't turn the wing pumps off during a turnaround. We turn the center tank pumps off to ensure we don't get low pressure cautions and to avoid fuel spillage. We'd also turn the packs off if we were shutting down, but on a turnaround, we'd turn pack 2 off normally and keep pack 1 on. Now, obviously, in terms of air conditioning, we take a view on what's needed, depending on the conditions on the day. We do need to take into account some airports are very restrictive on the use of the APU. So generally, also from a fuel saving point of view, if we can, we would turn the APU off. So we'll get the ground power on. We may be able to be supplied by ground air, but that's not always available. So get the APU bleed off first, and then we turn the master off. I'm going to leave it on for the sake of this tutorial, run through the next steps. And we've got the seat belts and beacon off already. So the engines, we have shut down the engines already. So we would now be deboarding. One thing we would do very early on, if not on the flight inbound, is look at our flight plan and fuel, making considerations as to what we need. If we're going back in the direction we came from, we've got a good idea of the conditions, the winds, turbulence, all those things, traffic, and we can factor that into our required fuel. So we would come over and we would be looking at our flight plan. And today that's a flight from here in Belfast, Aldergrove, over to Manchester. So we would review our fuel, and it's quite simply would come in and adjust it as required and send it over to GSX. Now, I've already done that for this one, but we want to request the fuel early on. Usually when we're setting the aircraft up, we get into a situation where we're waiting for others to complete their activities, such as a refueling, boarding, or de-icing even, those kind of things. But there's usually something we end up waiting on. Cockpit preparation, especially with 2 crew, doesn't take too long. So our initial turnaround setup would be to do the overhead panel, and we'll be scanning up, turning the ground recorder control on. Would have that into the captain position for my airline. Make sure these are in nav. There's no white lights essentially, and amber lights is what we're looking for. So exterior lights are off, nav and logo we want on for a turnaround. No smoking auto, emergency exit lights are armed. Keeping the APU on, we've got pack 2 off, that's our choice. That's something we've decided, so we can accept that white light. Generator faults, ambers here are normal when we've shut the engines down. And because we're going to be refueling, we've got the center tanks off as per my company SOPs. We don't need to do any fire tests because we've done those on the first flight of the day coming out. And then we check the right side of the overhead as well, looking for anything abnormal. Basically ensuring there's no white or amber lights showing. Then we come down, we would check around the center instrument panel, so we check the ISIS, correct, that's got the correct QNH in. coming down, acupressure gear lever down, 3 greens, clock sets, nose wheel and anti-skid is on, and the brake pan, it may be on this stage, but it's not today, so we'll view that in that stage. Then we come down to the pedestal, showing this is set up, the radar's off, most selectors normal, engine master switches are off, and the transponder, we want it above 2000, that's important, but we do that usually on the shutdown side of it. So it's selected to above the next departing flight, that's something we do as crew. And with that, we'll start setting up the MCDU. So we'll look at the data page, aircraft status, nav database, correct. We look at our idle performance and performance factor from the flight plan. So if I bring that up now, I'll be able to show you that. Now in the real world, my operator has a minus 3.5 idle factor across the fleet. Essentially that adjusts the top of descent point. But every aircraft will have a different performance factor. It's usually a minus because what that does is essentially a minus figure tells the MCDU there's more drag and adds drag to the calculations. So over time, an aircraft becomes less efficient, and therefore we start to get minus numbers going into the performance factor. So you can see I put -3, that's from the performance there. And I put my operator's standard fleet idle figures in there. Now, these are usually not immediately adjustable. You do have to enter ARM. You do have to enter ARM into the change code to be able to adjust the figures so they become blue, and then you can make the changes. Then we come through, we make sure that we've got no deselected nav aids. So we go into this page. We haven't sort of deselected anything on the way out, which doesn't need to be deselected anymore. And then we follow the standard diff script setup for the MCDU. So I do have a separate video on that, but essentially diff script, we look at the data page, which we have reviewed. We then look at init A, we pull in our data, and we fill in all our information in here, such as the flight number. So we're going to be EZ704. That goes in with our cost index of 60, T30 minus 30. Put the dropper bores in, 31489. We can pull in the latest winds aloft for the climb. Then we come to flight plan. We program in our departure, so we're expecting 25. There's no standard instrument departure routes from Belfast. Insert into Manchester the Macux 1 mic to 23 right. I'll check the distance that will come up here at the moment, 206, and that matches 201. It's within a 10 nautical mile tolerance. It's fine. Secondary flight plan, copy the active, and we can build in an engine out. So Echo Golf Alpha Alpha, going to be off 25. You can get your initial runway bearing on the airport page to 247, out to 30 miles, line select 2 on the left, and we can put a hold in there as well. Again, 247, of course, inbound, so coming on one-way track. We left select any waypoints. We can put Echo Golf Alpha Alpha as our destination. Now, we can also build up the performance for the return as well up here. We come into next phase and so forth. So for the approach, so you can build the whole thing up, and that's something we would do in the real world. Then we'd review the VADNAV, anything we need for our departure out of Belfast, and anything we need for the return. So we look at what's around us. There's no standard instrument departure. I'm not going to throw anything in there today, but that's where we would add those in at this stage. And we look at init B, and we put in our weights. Now, you may not always have the zero fuel weight center of gravity at this point in time. So we would use the planned zero fuel weight of 59.3 here. And then we would use a zero fuel weight center of gravity of 30 until we get the correct and final figure from the load sheet. Our expected fuel, block fuel is 4.4, and that's what we've ordered. We put 4.4 tons in. And our alternate fuel, the 1.4, goes in there, and you'll see got an extra 12 minutes to play with at the moment. And then we consider performance. So we will want to run performance figures quite early on to make sure we can get away with the expected load. Aircraft has now loaded. We do have the final load sheet, but we would do this with the prelim and send the prelim figures over before. And so we can do the final. We want to go config 1 plus F initially, make sure that works. Calculate, and you'll see there, flexing to 66, stop margin 572, 42, 42, 42. Turn that over to the MCDU, and then we'd want to review engine out acceleration. Depending on the MSA here, we would adjust that at this point here to make sure we're climbing above any terrain. We would, of course, verify performance data between captain and first officer, and also the clean speed up here, 213 matches. That's very important. That ensures there's no discrepancy in the aircraft's computers compared to what we've calculated on this separate computer, that is the EFB. There's a big discrepancy there, but one knot or so is common due to rounding up and down of figures. But if you're starting to see a few more than that, then you need to dive in and look at your figures and work out what's incorrect. We then set up our glare shield. So we want constraints on. We would set up navigation references with ADF or VORs. Usually VORs is what we have tuned. QNH is set, cross-check 3 times. Auto throttle's off, flight directors are on, and we'll get our first initial cleared altitude up here if we have received one. If we haven't, then we can leave it 100 below, so that sort of alerts us to the fact that, well, we haven't actually received that yet. So that's odd. We never normally get cleared to 3,900 feet. That reminds us to check the altitude. We haven't already received it. Let's say we have been cleared to 4,000. We can put that in. We want to make sure that we're on heading and vertical speed as well. Readjusting the brightnesses of our displays is something we'll do, and getting the aircraft set up in terms of lighting. An important one is to make sure your navigation back ring here is turned up enough so that you will see the weather information on the screen once it's selected and there's something to display. If it's turned down and there's thunderstorms ahead of it, you won't see it. So you may have turned that down for it being too bright on the way in, but conditions may have changed. So always check that out. And we want to come down to the pressure page and check that landing elevation is an auto. And we've got the IRS systems are in nav. So we would have our charts prepared. If we're Alder Grove, we'd need those for the briefing. We would usually want format initially for the briefing. That's weather, aircraft status, NOTAMs and threats. Then we would discuss our route and takeoff, so looking at the taxi, the system instrument departure, and our takeoff, and when we would reject on the takeoff. So usually below 100 knots we would reject for any reason. Between 100 knots and V1 we would reject only for red, amber ECAM warnings, cautions, an engine failure, an ATC stop message, or if we deem the aircraft to be unfit to fly. Above V1, we'll be go-minded, no actions before 400 feet, except positive climb, gear up, and applying toga if required. We then review our return strategy to the airfield, the engine outsid, and the expected runway to come back here into Belfast. And with the briefing, the cockpit preparation checklist is complete. So once refueling is complete, obviously, which it is now complete, we can turn the centre tanks back on. We can get the seatbelts on. Again, as mentioned, air conditioning in terms of packs is as required. We'd review the pack flow selector. So we've got below 130 passengers. We are able to turn that down to low, save a little bit of fuel. And that's 160 in the Airbus A320 one. We've got more than that today, so we're in the normal position. We would use high. We've got abnormally hot and humid conditions on board. Again, pilot's discretion. So all that remains now is really to get our clearance and continue with our final checklists, our weight and balance validation, performance validation, and we're good to go. Remember, SOPs do vary between airlines. This one is a little bit different, probably in terms of fuel pumps and potentially packs than some others. They will vary a little bit. They all work. If you are using one or another in the simulator, it will work for you. If you have any questions on that at all, please drop them into the comments and I'll do my best to answer those. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to stay up to date with the latest content, with more tutorials and full flight videos to come. Thanks for watching and take care.